Hey guys, Dr. Matt here. So I get a lot of questions about how much stomach comes out, how much remains, what size bougie we use, and so forth. Okay, so here's what it comes to. We always use a 36 French bougie on primary sleeve patients who've never had a surgery before. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, how much stomach actually comes out differs between individuals based on how big your stomach is to begin with, and particularly how wide your stomach is to begin with. When we stick the bougie down and squeeze it against the lesser curve, everybody more or less gets the same size sleeve in the end. But if you had a particularly wide, voluminous stomach, more proportionally comes out than if you had a less wide, thinner stomach, if you will. Okay? So if you happen to not have a massive gastric volume to begin with, you might lose 70% of your total gastric volume. If you happen to have a massive gastric volume to begin with, you're gonna lose 90% plus, okay? So it varies based on how wide your stomach is and, in all reality, how tall you are as an individual, because most people that are taller tend to have longer stomachs, and therefore you have a bit more volume at the end because we don't affect the length, we only affect the width, okay? Now, when it comes to how much and how fast you can eat and drink and how you're fuller sooner relative to others, this boils down to several things. Number one, how fast the sleeve empties, and number two, what the internal conformation of the sleeve looks like. We stick the bougie down there. In some patients, it's a straight shot and things just dump on through. In other patients, there's some twists and turns on the inside when the bougie is removed, and therefore things stick around longer, and the top of the sleeve might fill up sooner than the bottom of the sleeve, and you feel fuller on less relative to those that have a straight shot for things to just pour on through, okay? The other thing to consider here is, of course, liquids and less viscous solids will empty with gravity more readily than true solid foods. So as we expect, we want you to get to about 64 ounces of fluids per day to stay hydrated. There's no way you're gonna have 64 ounces of fluids per day with a 6 to 8 ounce sleeve, unless, of course, as that 6 to 8 ounces fills in the stomach, the pylorus opens, the liquids empty with gravity, and there's room for more. So liquid-based calories will allow you to have more volume and therefore more caloric intake than would be solid food calories. So you have to be careful when it comes to things that melt or things that would dissolve in a bucket of water, because that's gonna empty much faster from the sleeve than would a chicken breast. So if you have a pint of ice cream and you dump it into a bucket of water, it dissolves, it's mush, it's nothing. That's the same thing that happens on the inside, and quite readily that pint of ice cream is in your intestines ready for absorption. If you take a piece of chicken breast, and you dump that in the bucket of water, it just sits there. And that's the same thing that happens on the inside of the stomach. So it's not only about how big the sleeve is, how fast the sleeve empties, the internal conformation, but also the quality of what you're putting in there, whether liquid or solid, and whether carbohydrate and fat based versus protein based. So there's a lot of factors that vary between individuals when it comes to how fast things empty, how quickly and full you are, based on all these things we just talked about. But the key here, guys, is everyone ends up more or less within 5 or 10% of the same size sleeve, but there's variations between individuals that dictate how quickly things empty and how full you feel based on how much you're eating and drinking. Quite a few questions about, can I pick the size of my sleeve? In all reality here, guys, if you're asking if you can make it tighter, it's not safe. Smaller sleeves do not translate to more weight loss. There's been innumerable studies about this, and the key here is, if you try to make the sleeve smaller, you run the risk of making it too small, and then the nausea is greater, the risk for solid food intolerance is greater, and life is not as good as it could be if you stick with the standard 36 French. If you ask for it to be bigger to mitigate the potential for excess weight loss, also not a good idea, because if you're trying to make it looser, you're gonna by definition results in more volume, you're gonna by definition results in more fullness, more hunger. So to try to tailor the size of the sleeve based on one's weight loss preferences is not a good idea. The key here is everybody should go with the 36 French, and if you lose a little bit too much, it's easy to put some back on. If you don't lose enough, it's easy to augment the weight loss post-operatively through our recommendations with our program. But the best bet here is, and as it has been time tested, stick with the 36 French, rock it, follow the rules. 99% of the people are gonna respond the way they should with the 36 French. If you happen to be that 1% group, reach out to us, we'll figure out what the issue is, and we'll get you back on track.